Coming up on Primetime News, South Korea's spy agency says North Korea has executed its top defense official with an anti-aircraft gun for falling asleep during a meeting and being disrespectful. President Park Guen-hye called for a tight budget so that money saved can give a much-needed boost to the domestic economy. And job growth slows with the number of new jobs added in April marking the smallest increase in over 2 years. Stay tuned for these stories and more.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, May 13th. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thank you for joining us. The purges continues in North Korea.
The reclusive regime's Defense Minister Hyon Yong-chol was executed last month for disrespecting Kim Jong-un after having exhibited inappropriate behavior that angered the young leader.
That's right. And our Han Da-eun takes a closer look at the possible implications of this power move.
Insubordination to Kim Jong-un and neglect of duty. These appear to be the reasons why North Korea's Defense Minister Hyon Yong-chol was executed in public. Seoul's National Intelligence Service, in a confidential report to the parliament, said Tuesday that Hyun was shot dead with an anti-aircraft gun at a military school on April 30th, with hundreds of soldiers watching. The spy agency said Hyun had frequently expressed his dissatisfaction with Kim Jong-un's leadership and neglected to follow Kim's orders on several occasions. He even dozed off during a speech given by Kim at a large-scale military gathering, a behavior that is intolerable in a state like North Korea. Still, the execution comes as a surprise. Hyun, a four-star general, had maintained his status as the number 2 man in the North Korean military until very recently. In addition, he had paid tribute to the late leader Kim Jong-il and the country's founder Kim Il-sung, most recently at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun last month, alongside top military officials, and attended a series of events hosted by the Korean People's Army. Some pundits assert that the execution may be linked to Hyun's recent visit to Russia. Hyun visited Moscow to make arrangements for Kim Jong-un to attend Russia's Victory Day ceremony, which would have been Kim's first trip abroad since taking power 4 years ago. But it was an appointment the young leader didn't keep, and there is rising speculation that it may have been because Hyun failed in his diplomatic mission there. The spy agency says it is now looking closely into the political situation in Pyongyang and taking all possibilities into account. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, this latest execution is shocking to many. It seems to be a part of a larger pattern of purges initiated by their leader, Kim Jong-un.
And our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more about how the young leader could be using fear to consolidate his own authority.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to be removing anyone who challenges his power. That's according to South Korea's National Intelligence Service. In addition to having Defense Chief Hyon Yong-chol executed, the young leader also ousted a number of his closest aides over the last 6 months. In fact, Hyun is just one of 70 officials shot to death since Kim assumed leadership of North Korea in December 2011. One of the most shocking killings was Kim's uncle Chang Sung-taek, who was executed in 2013. In comparison, his father Kim Jong-il executed only 10 officials in the first 4 years of his leadership. The South Korean government said the frequent purges are part of Kim's power consolidation process.
The government views North Korea's purges as a method to promote and solidify Kim Jong-un's one-man leadership through the use of fear tactics.
But Seoul's National Intelligence Service said the purges have raised doubts about Kim within the ruling class. North Korean officials are reported to have said that one must be ready to give up his life before speaking up. While some say Kim's efforts to consolidate power will alienate elites, other experts rule out any sign of instability within the regime.
I think the Kim Jong-un regime is using shock tactics to stabilize the leadership. Considering that North Korea is not doing bad economically, the chances of a coup or a revolution are very slim.
Experts predict more senior officials will be purged in the coming days, a measure to ensure enduring loyalty to the North Korean leader. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And inter-Korean tensions flared today after Pyongyang sent a notice to Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff informing them about impending fire drills in the West Sea just above the Northern Limit Line, or NLL. The notice said the drills could occur anytime between 3 p.m. today and this Friday, and this is just coming in. They have just started. According to the Joint Chiefs, the communist regime designated 2 areas for these planned live fire drills, one some 10 kilometers away from the South's Baekneungdo Island and another 12 kilometers from Yeonpyeongdo Island. However, the North did not elaborate on the exact timing or scale of the drills. South Korea vowed to respond to any provocations with strength and is maintaining full readiness and closely monitoring the North's movements. Another North Korea-related news, Pyongyang recently announced a successful test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile, raising concerns over its arms capabilities. But international experts say the missile is still in its early stages. Son Jung-in explains why.
During a meeting hosted by the website 38 North in Washington on Tuesday, a veteran North Korea military expert raised doubts about Pyongyang's self-proclaimed successful underwater ballistic missile launch. Joseph Bermudez at All Source Analysis said he believes Saturday's launch was conducted from a barge submerged a few meters below the water and not from a submarine as claimed. He cited satellite imagery showing a submarine docked next to a barge. Speaking via video conference, Bermudez said that the test seems to have been focused on checking the launch technology, which usually happens in the early stages of development with missiles like this.
Skeptical that it was actually conducted from the submarine that we've observed so far. I think it would be more likely that it would be done from a barge.
Bermudez also said he suspected the photos of the launch released by the North could be photoshopped or manipulated in some way in order to exaggerate progress in its missile development. He pointed out some inaccuracies in the image, saying the photo shows no visible flame coming out of the missile's engine despite the reflection of a bright pink shadow in the water. Bermudez said he seriously doubted that North Korea would be able to conduct a test from a submarine that was only launched last October. He did note, however, that the North has made incremental improvements in its submarine and ballistic missile capabilities. Seoul's Defense Ministry shares that view and has urged the North to cease its missile development. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
What was supposed to be a regular training session at a military training camp turned deadly on Wednesday after a reservist opened fire on his peers. And we have more on this report, and apparently some military record compiled on this particular individual during his mandatory service offer some clues as to why he chose to take such drastic measures. Our Connie Kim has this report.
The shooting occurred at around 10:44 a.m. at the facility in Naegokdong in southern Seoul. Army officials said the incident happened after the 24-year-old shooter, identified by his surname Choy, was handed a rifle for shooting practice. Although details about Choy are scarce, a high-level military official said the soldier was under supervision for depression while doing his mandatory military service. Choy's motive is still unclear, but experts suggest his mental health may have played a role.
There's a high chance that Choy wasn't able to adjust back to society given the fact that he was under close watch during his military service. He might have been releasing his anger when he was handed a rifle during the shooting practice at the reserve force.
After completing military duty, South Korean men are required to serve in the reserve forces for 8 more years. This is the second shooting incident at a reserve camp since 2010, when a reservist shot himself. Given that history, the Defense Ministry and the Army say they're considering introducing new safety measures for the camps. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
At an annual pre-budget meeting to discuss Korea's fiscal policy for the next 5 years, President Park Guen-hye expressed concerns about overspending on state projects. She touched on the urgency of adopting the so-called pay-as-you-go system from the U.S. For details, we turn to our Choi Yu-sun.
Stressing the need to maintain the country's financial soundness to protect people's livelihoods, President Park Geun-hye directed officials to review state projects from square one when putting together the budget this year. She said projects that are found to be invalid or redundant should be eliminated. She also called for greater transparency in the state subsidy management system to prevent budget leaks. According to government data, Korea posted a deficit of nearly $28 billion last year. To better manage the budget mid to long term in an aging society with increasing demands for welfare, the president said there's an urgent need to adopt a pay-as-you-go system like in the U.S., where new spending or tax cuts must be paid for by a tax increase or spending reduction. She said the policy, which prioritizes fiscal restraint, has helped the U.S. government to achieve a budget surplus of $55 billion over the past 5 years. Japan has implemented a similar policy to maintain its fiscal health. President Park also took aim at the parliament for what she characterized as its imprudent spending through legislation. The presidential office says too many bills that require massive expenditures are submitted to Parliament without a proposal for ways to finance the plans. Urging lawmakers to approve pending bills related to the pay-as-you-go system, President Park compared the system to the way a homemaker would manage the household by first reducing unnecessary expenses when there's demand for new spending. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
With the president's directive in mind, the government is getting ready to carry out some thorough reviews looking to increase efficiencies and stimulate the economy with the 2016 budget. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
No stone left unturned. Officials will begin with an all-out review of government programs with a view to structuring next year's budget set to be allocated in June. They'll assess validity and apply a one-in, one-out policy to maintain the total number of projects. Authorities will also make sure that no individual organization receives multiple or unqualified welfare subsidies by setting up a consolidated management system for government aid. Making efficiency a priority, the government will also invite the private sector to play a bigger part in creating infrastructure or SOC, social overhead capital, such as roads and bridges. Continuing with labor reform efforts, Seoul will develop long-term plans to help young people find work overseas as the extension of the retirement age raises youth unemployment concerns at home. In terms of growing the economy, the Science Ministry will launch an R&D strategy control tower to boost support for small and mid-sized companies, while the Defense Ministry will open its doors to private think tanks involving more experts in defense-related decisions. Moving forward, the government pledges to use evaluation and monitoring to root out lax budget implementation in the future. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And President Park Geun-hye says Seoul will continue to work closely with Tokyo on considering prospects for a trilateral free trade pact with China and a regional treaty with Southeast Asia. The president met with Japanese business leaders and their Korean counterparts who were gathered in Seoul for an annual meeting. She said a regional FTA would generate synergy and offer them diverse opportunity to do business together. As for a recent decline in two-way trade, President Park asked the businessmen to work towards expanding trade, currently focused on intermediary goods, to cover consumer goods. The association's chairman expressed hopes of increasing cooperation in medicine and nursing, as both countries have to address low birth rates and aging populations. President Park didn't touch on historical issues that have strained Korea-Japan relations in recent years. Korea's two main political parties have shown no signs of reaching a compromise on a bill to reform the country's two pension systems, leaving the future of that and other bills in doubt. The main opposition NPAD wants to move forward with the bill, while the ruling Saenuri Party now says the two systems should be dealt with separately and the civil servant pension reforms passed first. Our Kim Jong-un has more on this ongoing tussle.
As debate over the pension bill continues, one party has gone on the defensive and the other is in offensive mode. On Wednesday, ruling Saenuri Party chief Kim Mo-seong conveyed his discontent with critics who say the reform plan was drawn up hastily, adding that consensus was only reached after 4 months.
The civil servant pension reform bill was discussed by various interest groups, and they settled some of their differences. We asked for cooperation from the opposition party to pass at least the civil servant pension reform bill, as agreed on May 2nd.
Meanwhile, the opposition criticized the ruling party for scrapping the original plan and the presidential office for meddling in parliamentary affairs.
President Park Guen-hye has blamed the National Assembly for not passing the civil servant pension reforms and emphasized that the National Pension Reform Plan will place a heavy burden on taxpayers. But there's no evidence for that. The president is just instigating conflict.
The party struck agreement earlier this month on a bill covering reforms to both systems, but never voted on it because of argument over a clause related to the national pension scheme. That part of the plan would increase the payout to 50% of a subscriber's pre-retirement income from the current 40%. The presidential office, however, rejected the plan, saying the 10% increase will come at a cost of $1.5 trillion through 2080. Given the impasse, there is growing concern that lawmakers may put off voting on other bills, only to come up empty-handed at the end of the May session. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
In April, Korea's new job creation rate was the lowest it's been in 2 years.
That's right. The government is not too worried, though. It's blaming the low growth rate on a temporary effect, April's high rainfall.
But according to our Kwon-soa, the forecast is not so sunny for youth unemployment. Take a look.
April was not a good month for job seekers, with the total number of people employed standing at 25.9 million. That's an increase of 216,000 jobs on year, the lowest growth rate in 26 months. Statistics Korea attributes the slow growth to bad weather, adding the dull figures are just temporary. After all, last month was the rainiest April in over 4 decades, with more than 14 days of rain. That helps explain why sectors that are affected by the weather, like agriculture, construction, and accommodation, saw significant drops in the number of new jobs. But with April's youth unemployment rate at 10.2%, the job market for people aged 15 to 29 is increasingly daunting. That's the highest rate for the month of April since related records were first compiled in 1999. And for the younger generation, experts say the trend may not be temporary.
Due to concerns that Korea's economy will grow at a slow pace for the long term, it's unlikely that the youth employment rate will improve, as companies are burdened by the amount of money it takes to train inexperienced young people.
And with so many young Koreans working part-time jobs as they prep for a permanent position, the actual unemployment rate in the group is even higher than 11%. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
And for the top international headlines, we connect to our Paul Yi, standing by at the news center. Paul, let's return to Nepal.
International aid groups there are renewing calls for support in the wake of the second major earthquake in less than 3 weeks. What's the latest situation on the ground?
Well, rescue operations resumed at daybreak this Wednesday in hopes of finding any survivors who may be still trapped under the rubble. Nepal's Interior Ministry says at least 67 people have been killed and nearly 2,000 people injured. Many of them had been caught in landslides and buildings that collapsed in large areas that remain dangerously unstable.
Preparing themselves to stay. Are they going to be able to? Are they going to have the coping mechanisms? Do they have the reserves? I wish I could answer that question for you today, but I can't. The situation is dire, and what we need to do is get goods out to them where they are, where they want to be, and of course leave the decision to them.
In the meantime, the Nepali Army is continuing to search for a U.S. Marine Corps helicopter that went missing when the 7.3 magnitude quake struck yesterday. The Pentagon says 8 people were on board the chopper. Emergency workers in the U.S. state of Philadelphia have been working through the night after an Amtrak passenger train derailed, killing at least 6 people. The train was traveling from Washington to New York City on Tuesday when it suddenly stopped, overturning several rail cars. More than 140 people have been hospitalized, with several in critical condition.
There's no circumstance under which there would be any service through Philadelphia on this Amtrak line for the rest of this week. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I mean, common sense says, I mean, you've got cars, you've got catenary, you've got track. I mean, it is completely wiped out.
Investigators are examining the crash site, trying to determine what caused the accident on one of the country's busiest routes. And shifting to Europe, NATO foreign ministers are holding talks on a range of security issues, from the crisis in Ukraine to the ongoing civil war in Syria. The meeting, which opened on Wednesday in Turkey, will also focus on developing a strategy to tackle instability in the Middle East.
But let us not be under any illusions. Afghanistan remains a dangerous place. Afghan soldiers and police have been engaged in fierce fighting since they took responsibility for securing the country at the start of this year.
Turkey's Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu says his country has received more than 1.7 million Syrian refugees over the past 5 years at a cost of over $5 billion. And finally, Germany and Israel are marking the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations. In a celebration of the milestone, a special concert featuring the works of prominent Jewish and German composers was held Tuesday in Berlin. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin and his German counterpart Joachim Gauck attended the event. Gauck praised the relationship that's developed over the past half-century, calling it a miracle based on mutual trust. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
The wind died down today compared to yesterday, but was still quite blustery. And a high wind advisory was lifted for the metro area, but people in Gangwon-do and North Chungcheong-do province have been dealing with strong gusts throughout the day today. But otherwise, the whole nation had a pleasant day under sunny skies, and tomorrow's temperatures are looking similar to a tad higher than today, but will be less sunny with patches of clouds sticking around. And daytime high here in Seoul will peak at 26, while Daegu and Gwangju will hit 30 and 28, but Busan will be slightly cooler, peaking at 21 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island should see a high of 28 and 26, while Dokdo rises to 22. While warm and sunny conditions continue through the weekend in the upper part of the country, southern regions could see sudden showers on Thursday and Friday. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And this has been Daniel Choy. Do join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.